What is happening, everyone? Coach Ishak with HawkFit Coaching and Legion Athletics, and your host for today's episode of Anabolic Radio. I'm joined today by IFBB Austin Current. How are you doing today, Austin?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing well. We're going to have a great episode for you guys. For the basis of this episode, we're primarily going to be talking about considerations versus general population clients and contest preparation clients. And, this is something that I feel like is very important to be spoken about just because, what you can be doing with your nutrition, what you can be doing with your training could be so expansive. And coming in this space as a general population person, just simply trying to improve your health, lose a little body fat, gain a little bit of muscle, can be confusing at times, and it can be hard to navigate. So we could open up this discussion, Austin, and we'll go ahead and build off from there. So in your opinion, what are some biggest considerations to be taken into account when it comes to setting a contest prep client up versus a general population client up?
It's a good question. I think timeline of goal is a really good place to start, and where that client is currently in their health status and their physique, and what's the projected timeline that individual needs in a contest prep versus what that general population person just wants to accomplish over a given period of time. And I think I think a lot of people get inspired by a lot of general population people get inspired by contest prep people they follow. And so we get into this headspace that my journey as a general population person has to look a lot like what contest prep looks like to that contest prep person. Right. And so we kind of get into these, and I talked about this on Emily Duncan's podcast fairly recently, kind of this idea of chronically going in and out of fat loss and muscle gaining phases, especially as general population people, and kind of how quote unquote toxic that can be to your mental health and you're just living your life, honestly. And so I think it's really important to really kind of put forth some of these concerns. And I like to, this is where talking to an individual over the phone or over FaceTime or something before you work with them or maybe after they sign up, and you're able to really hone in on where those things are, where's their headspace at? Where did they get this inspiration to either create change? And if it's a contest prep person, who do they, who inspired you to do this? If this is your first show, like, who are you following? What sort of trajectory are you expecting? And what's the end date, the end goal of this endeavor? And then like the Gen Pop person, especially because a lot of them are inspired, especially people in our circles that reach out to guys like us, follow contest prep people, and they're inspired by them. And they're like, hey, I don't necessarily want to do the contest prep, but I want to lean out. I want to go through a fat loss phase, or, what my favorite person I follow always talks about. And it's important to really frame from the start and manage expectations and really understand where that person wants to get to. And, there's a component of giving, obviously you have to get buy-in, obviously on the side of contest prep and general population clients, but it's more so important that you get buy-in, in my opinion, from general population people, because typically to make that, it's important for both, absolutely. But I think for that contest prep person, most likely they've put a lot of time and effort into choosing the right coach. They thought about this, they've given it consideration. They're pretty bought into your systems. If they've gone through, they've signed up, they're working with you, like they're pretty bought in. But to a general population person, they're probably more or less like they maybe looked at a few different options. It was mainly based off of price and or proximity and or how you connected over the phone or in your conversation, or what was offered in your programming or whatever it was. And so you still have a sort of a road ahead of you to gain that buy-in from that person. And so You know, there's a component of setting expectations, understanding where that client's coming from in the start. And I really think, you know, this is a pretty widely accepted thing at this point, but I really think it's important that you give yourself enough time to figure out what's going to ensue over this next 6 months, essentially. Like, especially if it's your first prep, get into the prep. Figure out what a prep entails. You know, my first prep ever was 6 weeks, you know, and I was already in pretty good condition, but I still lost a considerable, I mean, I was very lean for my first show, and I did it in 6 weeks. Obviously would never recommend that to someone today, but you know, back in 2013, like, I didn't know any better. I kind of did it myself. I had help from a natural bodybuilder that was at my gym who had success through the natural bodybuilding Olympia circuit. I was fortunate to have him there, like, working at the gym I was at. And so he helped me kind of like set some things up, but there's a lot to like leave on my own. And then the more I went on and the more I progressed in my competing career and I was helping clients with it, when that time came, the more and more time I would take. You know, I would take, if I knew I could do it in 4 months, I gave myself 6 to 7 months to really, really do it, because life happens. Things come up. Our lives aren't as predictable. And so this happens more and more as you get older, but especially in a very weird time that we're kind of in right now, life is not very predictable. Like, at any time, your gym could be shut down. At any time, you know, things could massively change. Like, maybe the shelves aren't stocked as much as they once were because of what we're going through, or, you know, things around you are just being shut down. Your life as a whole has changed. Maybe you've lost your job now. Like, give yourself more time to really set your life up and see through the process of this experience. And I think that's the first line of defense, right? Obviously, we haven't even got to what that looks like nutritionally or from a programming perspective, but I think, and like we were discussing before before we hit record, was like, one of the biggest things I've learned over the last few years is the art of managing expectations and how important that is for every individual. And we do implement that a lot within our coaching, whether it's contest prep or general population client. So not sure where you want to kind of take it from there, but that's kind of like my first line of defense. You know, if you're someone who's interested in you're trying to search for a coach, you know, really search for a good one that's good for you. And be sure that they're on board with connecting with you in this way. Be sure that they're on board with learning what you're about, learning why you want this, learning where your head's at with all of it before you really jump into it. Because not only that lets you know that they're in it with you, and they're not there just to kind of like, you know, kind of just figuratively throw your programming and nutrition at you and kind of like see if you can juke and jive through the experience, but actually, like, are they there with you throughout this process? And especially if you're doing a contest prep, you need someone there. You know, and especially if it's your first time, like, you need to have a good experience. I truly believe you need someone to be there with you. At least someone experienced and or knows what the hell's going on.
Absolutely. Great points, man. Great points. And I think, you know, this is a question that's heavily context dependent. It's dependent on the individual and what they're trying to accomplish. But one point that I really love that you brought up is expectation management, right? Because a lot of people could have an expectation reality mismatch in regards to what they're trying to accomplish. And this could lead people trying to, you know, I mean, and it's even more common with, you know, Instagram today. Everybody wants to be lean and shredded, but they don't necessarily know what it takes to achieve that goal, right? And they have an expectation and reality mismatch. They're trying to accomplish something in 6 weeks when likely they'll need anywhere from a couple months to try and even get in a good position to actually induce a fat loss phase, right? So me personally, when I'm setting up a client, and I know it's probably the same for you as well, general health is probably the most important foundation when it comes to setting someone up, right? Especially way before you even induce a fat loss phase. Like if the goal is body composition related, it must first and foremost start with restoring your health, especially if you're coming from a place where you haven't been managing your nutrition appropriately for years, or you've been super inactive and you don't have even like the strength to tolerate like a barbell, or even a barbell squat, or you don't even understand the mechanics of the squat. It could be so expensive, but reality and or expectations in reality is something that has to be established at the get-go. I definitely think setting short-term and long-term realistic goals is something that's super valuable, and this could also tie into establishing a rate of loss, depending on the person's experience level. So anywhere from 1 to 1.5 pounds, or maybe, you could go on the aggressive end from anywhere from 1.5 to 2 pounds to maybe 2.5 pounds for maybe like an obese individual or someone who wants to achieve that goal in a quicker time frame, right? And I think that's super big. And, establishing a rapport with your coach is something that's super important, right? And the more that you communicate, the better position that you're placing your coach in to understand what you're actually trying to achieve. And it's actually going to place them in a better position to, make protocols more individualized for you and your lifestyle. And expectations is big. And definitely also think, setting up your environment for success. So obviously, if you go to your pantry and it's filled with a bunch of processed things that aren't necessarily, the best from a calorie spending perspective, right? And you go consistently lean on those things when you're trying to adhere to a calorie deficit, that's probably not the most productive thing you should be doing from, obtaining a sufficient amount of micronutrients perspective, or like wholesome, nutrient dense foods perspective. So I think that's something definitely big that should be taken into account. Now, when it comes to setting up your environment for success, how important do you think that is for a general population person versus a contest prep?
I think it comes down to experience level a lot. I think anyone is susceptible to failing on their own accord, meaning that I would label myself someone with a lot of self-control. I've gone through many contest preps, and I would just label myself in control of my decisions. As a very introspective, self-reflective person, there's a gap period between sort of that stimulus sensation of or trigger and my response. And that's just something that I've collected over the years and gotten better at. But I think depending on your experience level and kind of your experience with dieting in your past, and your kind of how you're setting this current one up, depending on how your coach or yourself are setting this up, it could be different for you. So I think managing your environment's huge. I think managing your environment to set yourself up for success and make the right decision easier to choose, essentially. Like make it easier to make the right decision. And I think that comes down to, having minimal things in your current environment that distract you, that cause you to choose foods, for example, or choose behaviors that aren't conducive to your end goal. And a lot of that comes down nutritionally. It comes down to, I think, I grew up eating honey buns and God knows what, right? Swiss cake rolls, and anything Little Debbie put out was the GOAT. So,
Little Debbie.
Yeah. So it was, to have, but if you look at even a small honey bun, right? Like you look at the macros of that, it could be like, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but like, let's say 10 grams of fat, 48 carbs and 1 gram of protein for something that would take me 2 bites to eat, right? And I'm going to be starving after I eat it. Like there's going to be no satiation to that snack.
Hyper palatable.
Just hyper palatable. It's just it's pretty empty of nutrition other than just pure energy, calorie density. And so, that's not a great way to allocate resources. Not a good place to allocate energy or allocate towards the betterment of myself for that goal that I have, right? So getting those type of foods and those type of triggers and things out of your environment, I think is really helpful and really crucial to making the better decision easier to make. Similar to like when I work, I don't listen to music that has lyrics. When I'm working, I don't have anything on that can distract me, like a video or the TV or anything like that. Or if I'm trying to, go through a fat loss phase, like I don't even purchase the foods that I find to be my trigger of, I know this certain type of cereal, I have a really hard time having one serving of it. I will quickly eat the whole box of it, not out of like a bad relationship with food, just because I know I could technically cut corners and still maybe get to where I want to go through experience. But I don't even want to have that in my environment. I don't even want to have those triggers there, because as soon as I start making excuses and sort of deviations and detours without need, it's just purely there because like, oh, maybe, I could still do this. I'll tack on some cardio at the end, or I'll just throw on a little bit more volume and it'll be fine. And, once you get into that headspace, when you can start to make excuses and you start to create things in your environment that you have to then now add more work to yourself to overcome, again, that goes back to the general principle of make the thing that's better for you easier to make that decision easier, right? Make the good decision easier to make. So it kind of comes down to that foundational principle. So I think your environment's huge. I think your support system's huge. This is something I always talk about to everyone, really, competitors or general population, is you need a good support system. You need someone who's supporting this goal, or a group of individuals who are kind of supporting this goal. They don't have to be on it with you, but it definitely can help. But it needs to be someone that isn't constantly tearing that down or mocking it or belittling it or undermining it with pressures that don't need to be there, right? So, if your partner isn't on board, you need to have a conversation to, I've had numerous conversations with clients, both general population and contest prep, of, they'll come to me and say like, hey, I'm struggling. My partner really isn't on board. Typically females, because the male typically just doesn't quite understand their goal. And also males can just get away with more reckless behavior and still somehow achieve what they want to achieve. Meaning they can just eat like assholes and still, improve their body composition if they're doing other things correctly. Genetics are a little bit more on their side. Physiology is a little bit more on their side, things like that. But, they'll come and they'll message me or email me and say like, hey, this isn't working on behalf of, just my partner doesn't get it, or he's not supporting this, or these little comments really get to me and I end up eating the foods I don't want to necessarily eat, or, when I go, at least they'll kind of gang up on me and they'll make me eat something. And it's just, when you take a step back from these things, you're just like, these have all happened to me personally. But I really learned how to address it head on with whether it's a partner or my family or those I'm hanging around during the process. And I'm like, look, guys, this has nothing to do with you. And if you feel in any way insecure about my decisions here, I'm sorry, but I'm officially not, like, that's officially not my problem. And I love you, but I need this support from you guys, and I'm not asking for much. I'm just asking that I can sort of eat the food I want to eat in peace without you guys harassing me about it. And I don't think that's too much to ask. And that's kind of how I said it.
Still
I
be
addressed
an
my family
asshole.
that. Yeah, and if you really think about it, like, why does it matter? And typically it matters because they're now insecure because you're making them feel bad about their decision making, which is probably in their betterment of their health in general, which is probably not necessarily a bad thing. But it can be bad for your relationship immediately when I get that. So, and if it's your partner, you need to have a conversation. What is the limiting factor? You know, what are the things that are just standing in their way of understanding what you want? Have you articulated what you want to your partner? You know, is this something that you've actually had a deep, meaningful, reflective conversation with your partner with or about? And the typical answer is, well, he kind of knows, or I've kind of mentioned it. And, you know, being a male talking to a female in this typical instance, you know, I can come from the male's point of view, and I can almost plead our stupidity of being able to read minds and to be able to extrapolate what you're trying to tell me, like, you know, on the male behalf, right? So, or what you're trying to tell your partner. And, you know, you need to lay it out, not that they're stupid, but you need to lay it out very obvious and very straightforward on why you're passionate about this happening, why you're passionate about creating this change, why you need this change in your life, and how much it would mean to them that they support this goal. And if you do that, almost anyone is on board. Like, if they're your partner, if they're your person you've chosen, they're going to be on board if you do your job and articulate it to them. Right. So it's a two-way street. You can't just expect someone to know something that you never told them. Right. And I think we do that a lot with those in our immediate environments. And I think that goes largely into controlling your environment alongside food and other environmental cues. But I think your relationships play a huge role in that practice of creating change, especially if it's positive change that typically makes others uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Great points, man. Great points. And to add on what you're saying, those of you who are listening, I'm assuming you understand that you don't necessarily have to restrict from certain foods, right? Everything in moderation. But there are some instances where those super high calorie dense, hyper palatable foods are not the most productive things you should be, quote unquote, spending your calories on when it comes to an efficiency standpoint, right? When it comes to like getting the most nutrients out of the food you're consuming. And that's not to say you can't enjoy some ice cream or a slice of pizza here and there. It depends on your goal, right? Especially contest prep versus general population. If you have a general population person and you're taking more of an open-ended approach, you have more of that flexibility. Or if you're a competitor in the off season, you have more flexibility. Whereas with contest prep, you know, it's also important to have locked in consistency in place, and that allows you to better manage your variables, and that allows you to know what changes need to be implemented, whether that be with your food selection or whatever the case may be. And that's a great point. And, you know, just to add on a little more, you know, contest preparation isn't necessarily a inherently healthy process, right? And although it might not be a healthy process, you know, getting to the level of conditioning that's required to be competitive on today's stage, our goal should be to do it in the healthiest way possible while preserving health. And that's just something to take into account. So if you have a contest prep related goal and you're listening, a contest prep can exacerbate a lot of issues that you already have, whether that be with your health or whether that be your relationship with food. So that's just something very big you have to take into account before, you know, going further with that goal, right? And really just communicating with the coach. Like, you don't have to start working with them right away, but if they're a good coach, you know, and they're setting you up correctly, You're going to have a consult, you're going to have a phone call, you're going to have a conversation about your goal and what you should be doing going forward. And these are all things you should be bringing to their attention, right? And you shouldn't be scared of communicating these things with them either, or asking them these types of questions. So that's just something to take into account. And if they're being an asshole about it, that's a red flag automatically right off the bat. And so great points, Austin. And just to further build off into this, when it comes to tracking progress, okay, one big reason as to why a lot of people, don't progress, whether that be with improving their health or whether that be with their body composition related goals, the big reason why a lot of people don't progress is because they don't have any form of quantifiable data they're able to manipulate over time or see these trends with, right? So when it comes to tracking progress, there's a few metrics that we use, that I use when I'm working with my clients. I'm sure you use too. That's, just weighing yourself consistently, taking weekly or bi-weekly pictures of yourself, taking body measurements, keeping a training log so you can see how you're progressing with your training, right? And that gives so much insight to the coach as to what you're doing and, what you're able to recover from and still progress. And using a pedometer to really quantify how much you're moving every single day, right? NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is something that goes over most people's heads. Probably one of the easiest, simplest ways to see changes in body composition, especially if you're a super sedentary person. But Austin, I digress. Let's go ahead and hear from you when it comes to tracking your progress. How big of a variable do you think that contributes to someone's ability to progress?
I think it's a big one because I always say this, but success lies in the metrics you're tracking. So, this goes back to sort of, this could be on any front, whether that's sort of your social reach or how you're valuing your social landscape as a whole, how you're valuing your body composition changes, your physique changes, and how you're managing those expectations and how your coach is managing feedback and behavior. So I think all the things you mentioned are absolutely important. And I think keeping tabs on things like digestion is really big. I think keeping tabs on things that like sleep is very big, right? Because there's a deemable sweet spot of deficit, volume, talking calorie deficits, training volumes, training intensities, training stimuli based off of kind of what is the peak effort I can get out of you? Not that you're capable of, but what's the peak effort that your body is capable of while still maintaining a good health status, while your blood markers are still looking good, your recovery's still looking good, your sleep's good, your digestion's not wacky, right? So I ask a question, we ask questions about what your digestion looks like, what your stool looks like, right? So, we don't need photos, but I like to know whether, is that a good toothpaste consistency? Is that how, is that a once, twice a day occurrence, like pretty normal? And what we can extrapolate from that is, if we go 6 weeks where everything's really normal and all the other markers are holding up, but, as we're progressing volume, as we're progressing intensity, as we're progressing sort of volume or intensity of calorie deficit, does digestion now go to, well, now I went 5 times in a day and it's kind of watery, and I feel I'm feeling impacts there, but everywhere else I feel kind of okay. Well, okay, was that something that we ate, or can I sort of see what's going to happen next week and we're going to stop recovering, your sleep's going to start going to shit. There's early signs of what's going to happen, right? So your physiology is going to respond, and sometimes you may still feel fine. You can work through it, and this is where having a good coach, and this is where having a good relationship and a good relationship with that coach, but a good relationship to what you're trying to accomplish. Because, me being, a prideful person, someone who really does care about giving my full efforts, showing who I am within a process, right? And especially contest prep or transformation physically is always one of those where we don't want to feel weak. We don't want to seem weak to others. We want to seem like we're dominating this experience, and we are the owner. We're taking extreme ownership of this, and we're not going to be beaten by this process. And that typically manifests itself into people overdoing it and not listening to their physiology, not listening to their mental health, not listening to the markers that are right in front of them. And if you're not tracking them, you don't quite know what they're there, right? You don't really notice. You don't take notice to, well, I don't know. I just go to the bathroom, like, or sometimes I usually wake up 4 times a night, like whatever, but I train hard. And it's like, okay, these things matter, man. Like all these things matter. And so if we're noticing things downstream or upstream are starting to really change, or our progressions in training or intensity or volume of deficit or whatever duration of time into the prep, things just really start to go backwards for us or deviate. We need to notice. And that may be a sign of taking a diet break. That may be a sign of spending time in maintenance to see if these things sort of autocorrect themselves, or something else obvious comes up that could be lingering. And then just keeping mental health in check, right? So keeping tabs on, how did you feel this week? Are you someone who kind of regularly has a meditation practice? Are you a mindful individual? Is this something that's important to you? If not, and you have a lot of accumulated stress in your life, you're a very anxious person, you don't quite know how to handle your mental health, well, here's some suggestions on how to handle that. Or here's some practices that have shown to be very noteworthy of improving those things, right? So everything physical could be on point, but if your mental health isn't there, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And, if you're chronically anxious or chronically stressed or whatever, we know that that's going to manifest itself into negative impacts on your physique, negative impacts on recovery and performance. And it may just not be a good time for you to go through this experience, or if that's a contest prep, or if you're someone who is just a general population client, or just a kind of your gym goer who loves the experience and likes to create change, or is looking to create change like this, then we may need to alter that goal, right? So this may not be the time to, because as you said, these processes exacerbate issues, right? So if we have a small issue that we can't really see, there's always a threshold at which we're not really seeing side effects of this issue that is there. But when we do something to intensify what we're doing, it's going to exacerbate this issue. And I don't know how many issues each individual has. I mean, we all have our own issues, right? But like, is this an issue that's going to drastically impact what we're trying to do? Maybe, maybe not. But we don't figure that out until a couple months in, 3 months in, 4 months in. And that's what I said in the beginning, is managing expectations, setting an accurate timeline, and having just a good idea, because even if you're a seasoned competitor, each contest prep is different, right? You may lose body fat easier some contest preps than others. And it all comes down to what your life looks like, and everyone's life typically is ever evolving and always changing, right? And unless you're Benjamin Button, we all typically get older in this process. So things tend to fall apart as we age, get a bit harder, and life seems to get more complicated, right? So those are things that we understand pretty well. And so it's important that you're constantly evolving your methodology, you're constantly evolving your approaches to what you're trying to do.
Always evolving, always getting better, always improving. Great points, man. Just to build off what you said, you'd mentioned biofeedback. So for those of you who are listening, you have no idea what biofeedback is. Chances are you've probably been using it, but you don't know. And it's simply your body relaying messages and health status updates to you, right? All you have to do is really tune in and listen to those. And biofeedback could range anywhere from like your heart rate to your blood pressure to stress. Stress is a big one. Stress is such a big one because we only have so much control over the amount of stress we're able to induce through our resistance training, right? And what we can't manage has to be worked out through activities like meditating or talking to someone or going on a walk. Or this is why stress management is so crucial when it comes to any, body composition or physique transformation. And further expand off of biofeedback, sleep, digestion, like you said. And me personally, I have a section in the, I know you probably do too, because biofeedback is huge, right? But I have a section in the spreadsheet where we track biofeedback. So literally, you just have to listen to your body and how you feel. This could be, digestion after you consume a certain food or certain meal, and it upsets your stomach, or it's not digesting properly, or whatever the case may be. Biofeedback is huge, and it's a tool that's severely underrated when it comes to getting more data that will make getting from point A to point B 10 times easier. And I know we briefly spoke about sleep and how much of a big role do you think that plays when it comes to hunger management, right? Because, we rely on two hormones to help us when it comes to, our hunger throughout the day, and that's leptin, ghrelin. If there's an imbalance in that, we're more prone to be consuming hyperpalatable, less satiating based food. So you want to expand off into there?
Yeah, we can briefly. There's a deep hole that we can go down to with sleep and behaviors that you're putting forth to either make your sleep better or worse on a daily basis, on a decision basis, down to how much coffee you're consuming or caffeine you're consuming, as we live in a more and more caffeinated world, right? So like the Monster brands, Rain, Bang, like all these great tasting energy drinks that are really popular that we maybe don't think of, like you have 2 a day, and then you could maybe have tea in the afternoon, and or maybe you started with a coffee and then midday you needed this and this, and all of those decisions are throwing off your circadian rhythm and throwing off your ability to then sleep well or have good sleep quality, even if you have good sleep quantity. So don't get too lost in that. Oh, I always sleep. I'll sleep my 7 hours, and it doesn't matter. I could drink coffee right before I go to bed, and I'll sleep fine. And it's like, you may sleep the hours, but it doesn't mean you're sleeping well, right? It doesn't mean you're getting the quality of sleep, and that does impact. As someone, I know we chatted about this briefly, as someone who's struggled with sleep over the last couple of years, this is something that I never had a problem with throughout my life. And all of a sudden, a lot of things happened, and I found myself with really troubled sleep over a couple year period. And so this topic is close to my heart, and it's something that it will take a toll on your life. It will take a toll on your health. It'll take a toll on every part of your life and every part of your health. And when that comes to a contest prep, you need to safeguard your sleep like it's your training session, right? Like you wouldn't dare allow someone to completely strip that from you, right? Like you'd figure out a way to do it, and you do it well, and you do it to the best of your abilities. And sleep should not go
to the wayside,
untethered, right? It shouldn't go to the wayside, and you shouldn't forget it. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be a forethought that I know things that I'm doing well today. If you're choosing to go through a contest prep, obviously, depending on your responsibilities in life, whether you have children or you have a demanding job or whatever you have, a lot of responsibilities that pull you away from this one thing, you got to prioritize those things more and more, right? Like you have to really, really prioritize, all right, when is this training session going to be done? When can I do it well? And when can it happen in the day? And what can I do in my life to make this sleep a priority? And, this is harder for some and easier for others, but I think no matter who you are, you have to take responsibility for it. And it should not be an afterthought, because it can have such a large impact on your your satiety, your appetite as a whole, your metabolism as a whole, your ongoing health status, your ability to recover and perform, your ability to have a good rate of fat loss, muscle retention, brain health, mental health, right? So all the benefits that we adore and love from strength training, everything from improved muscle status, so improved muscle mass, tissue, strength, balance, coordination, cardiometabolic health, mental health, brain health, right? So there's so many things, longevity into older adulthood, later in life, more independence, less chance to get Alzheimer's, dementia, memory disorders, things like that, right? So there's so many things that we almost we're starting to pay more attention to within this sort of why resistance training, why strength training is so valuable, but we haven't seemed to connect in the world of hustle that we live in, the world of grind and distraction. And I'm right there with you. I'm not talking down to you. I'm on your level here. I'm with you. We live in a world where we have endless opportunity to work all day long, or we're in a world where we can chronically be distracted, and taken off course of our main goal, and that's to be productive, be efficient, be effective in our day, whether that's in our relationships or our profession or towards our body composition goals or contest prep goals or whatever. So it definitely, if there's one thing to take from that, is sleep should not be an afterthought. It should absolutely be a forethought, and it should be a forethought that's just as important as your training session.
Great points, man. Great points. And, for those of you who are listening who aren't even interested in, contest prep or contest prep related goals, there's so many health benefits that come alongside resistance training and just taking steps to improve your health. And chances are, in improving your health, you'll not only be able to work more efficiently and effectively, but you'll enjoy your quality of living. And, most people aren't competitive athletes with timetables. So if you feel like you need to, take things a little bit slower, with your goal, or, how consistently you go to the gym, or, what you're doing nutritionally, then that's not a problem at all. There's no end date to this, right? When you achieve your goal, you're not going to completely fall off track. The goal is to integrate this as part of your lifestyle to improve your quality of living, not hinder it. And I think that's something that goes over most people's head. And when it comes to, we could expand off into nutritionally or training wise, but when it comes to, improving consistency, specifically on the nutrition side of things, I feel like what you do over time has such of a significant impact on your ability to achieve that end goal and enjoy the process and your whole system along the way. So obviously, measurement technique, that's something that's super big. Either quantifying how much you're consuming is super important. Therefore, you'll be able to better determine which direction you need to be moving in conjunction to listening to your biofeedback and your fluctuations on the scale, right? And so the measurement technique is super big. I know, if you have a contest prep related goal, there can be periods of times, or even at the tail end of the contest prep, where you can be a little neurotic with it. And that's not inherently a bad thing, but it's just what's required in order for you to achieve that goal that you set out for yourself. For a general population person, like I said at the beginning of this episode, if you have an open-ended approach for your goal, you have a little bit more flexibility that you're able to exercise, right? And I think making it a big deal is super big. because it's important. It's your nutrition, it's your health. It should be something that's managed appropriately, right? And, the ability to quickly track foods and study those trends is a tool that's severely underrated by so many people. And I'm not saying you have to be tracking 24/7 for the rest of your life, but really just give it a go for 6 months and challenge yourself and think about what you're able to learn throughout that entire process. And as soon as you gain a little bit more experience, you'll be able to, not track so neurotically or consistently. You'll be able to take a little bit more of an informed, intuitive approach when it comes to your nutrition. And so in your opinion, what are some techniques that you would like the listeners to consider when it comes to improving their consistency on the nutrition side of things, or even on the training side of things?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that it's important that there's a lot of disconnection between, and I don't know where this necessarily stems from or comes from, but I think there's a lot of disconnection between other parts of our life and what we do nutritionally. So I don't think anyone would tell you otherwise that, understanding your budget financially, budgeting your finances over a 6-month period would be a bad endeavor. I don't think anyone would rationally tell you that that's a bad idea. Just to get a grasp on your bad spending habits. And this is the same with food, right? So we have bad spending habits on how we spend our kind of our food budget on. So in that, that I think that has a direct correlation as far as how it all operates and the mindset we take on it to things like our finances, the things like a contest prep or a goal, a body composition goal is a lot like you having a strict deadline for something at work, right? You're going to have to put things, disciplines forth, and you're going to have to make things a priority that gets you closer to that goal. And so or changing your body composition or going through a contest prep, it's a physical deadline where the tools to get to that deadline of achieving that goal are things we have to do physically. Your nutrition matters. Your ability to manage your nutritional budget matters. Your ability to track things closely matters. Your ability to concentrate on that physical goal matters. So your ability to create consistency at the gym and with your nutrition and sleep and all of these things matter, right? So I don't think people would think twice about, well, I have a strict deadline at work, so I have to get to work at the same time. I have to get there early every day, and I have to stay concentrated on what I'm doing for these chunks of time because I know I have a meeting midday that's going to throw me off. These are habits that we have at work professionally. These are habits we have in our relationships that we don't think twice about. These are habits hopefully you have within your financial life that we're all trying to kind of constantly get better at. But for some reason, there's this correlation with nutritional health or mental well-being that have almost been extrapolated and generalized that if you're tracking your nutrition closely or you care about it and you seem a little bit more focused or diligent or consistent with it more so than what that person would, or one of your friends or maybe a colleague or someone else who's ill-informed on your goals would label an unhealthy behavior, right? They would label it, and again, some of this does manifest into unhealthy behaviors. So I'm not discounting that by any stretch. And if you do find yourself in this situation, there are professionals out there to help you who are trained to do so. And you should seek out their guidance. And we see this with mental health, with therapists and whatever else. And I believe in those practices, but don't automatically label someone. So if you're someone who has friends in your life, or you have people in your life that you've sort of mislabeled or misrepresented because they do care about these things, think about that. Reflect on why you're thinking that, and reflect on why you're judging these people just for caring about it, right? So they don't judge you for working hard at work. They don't judge you for being diligent about concentrating on your emails 6 hours a day. They don't belittle you for caring about your budgeting and, I'm not going to go out and splurge on dinner. I'd rather just cook at home. So why are we belittling people for caring about what they're ingesting and what they're putting into their body and how they're sort of putting forth that effort to create a positive change within their life physically, which we know has a huge impact on your life in all other areas, right? You have an increased sense of well-being, satisfaction within life. You're more confident. You have a higher self-esteem. So self-esteem is just kind of that reputation you have about yourself. It's the reputation that you hold about yourself, or to yourself. And so, there's a lot of positive things that can come from this. Obviously, they can manifest themselves, as I said, in negative behaviors, right? And that's something that you should seek guidance on if you've reached that point, or, have someone. And this is where a coach kind of comes in sometimes too, is helping you better manage those things, right? So you get overwhelmed, you get over obsessive on things that maybe don't matter as much, right? You give weight to things that are less important to things that you're not even thinking about that have a lot more weight, right? So this manifests itself typically into, well, I'm doing a ton of training, I'm training 7 days a week. I'm eating little to no food, I should be progressing. And then you start to ask like, well, how's your stress? How's your sleep? How are your relationships? How's your work life? And they're like, well, all that stuff doesn't matter. I'm just focused on my physical. And it's like, those things matter. Those things matter way more than you think, right? So instead of training 7 days a week, let's train 4. Instead of eating 1,000 calories, let's eat 1,800. And now let's focus on getting these other parts of our life in order. And what you typically see is everything sort of starts to fall into place. If not perfectly, they start to fall into place a little bit better, right? So these things do matter. But I think my main point there was to sort of reevaluate the way you're thinking about the relationship you have to others who care about their physical health. And I think it's important to safeguard, because other people, as you go through your life, other people will, again, I don't know where this comes from, but they will, and probably insecurity, but they will belittle you. They will make you feel bad about making a better decision for yourself, right? And we see this with, if you've ever been in a relationship where you're trying to improve yourself, but your partner doesn't believe in that, or they haven't gotten to that place, you could just, typically comes up to be, well, we're growing in different directions. That's typically what's said, right? And it's true. And I think this is the same with relationships you may have, whether this is close or just professional. If you go out to eat and you get a salad, they're like, oh, you don't need to eat a salad, you're skinny. Oh, you're fine. Like just eat one burger. And it's like, that's not why I'm not eating a burger. I feel fine with eating a burger. It's that in other parts of my life, I really, this matters to me, and I'm making this decision for myself and not you. And I don't think that needs any more explanation. I don't think they deserve anything more than, this is my decision. You can get a burger. I'm not going to sit here and I don't care what you eat.
Do you even energy balance, bro?
Yeah. But that's sort of my main point there. Like, there's a lot of places I could have gone with that, but I think it's important that we reframe and restructure the way we're considering and thinking about these things, whether they're for ourselves or for others. And the habits and consistencies and the things that you can get better at and improve upon will come over time, and you'll get better at that. But I think until you learn how to consider it and think about it, all of those things are second to first figuring out where you stand on this thing, or you stand on these things, and how you're judging yourself or others for making these decisions.
Absolutely, man. Great points. Absolutely love what you said. And, I think mental health is something that's not really spoken about too often in the industry. And it's something that I feel like it has a significant impact on a lot of people, especially when it comes to like achieving whatever goal that you set out for yourself. And this is maybe just me just asking this for my own curiosity. How can we switch the conversation or bring more attention to the impact that the mental health side of things has on an individual?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I think it comes back to reframing our thought process on it. And I think it comes back to reframing our reward systems. So we're rewarded, I just mean generally and or culturally, you're typically rewarded, especially in Western culture, to, if you work long hours, you dedicate, you work hard, you make more money, you impact a greater number of people, whether that's good or bad. You do these things, you're self-sacrificing. Those are rewarded for being good, right? And we're not necessarily rewarded as much of, today I took a day off. You're not going to get a message. You're not going to get a plethora of DMs or, a ton of feedback to like, yes, dude, like, or, yes, that, this is the best thing for you. I'm so proud of you. This is awesome. Congratulations. And I'm not saying it should be met with that, but I'm saying that, if you post something or you put forth something in your life that, gets you higher status, you get a new car, or you make it known that you've made more money, or this was a big deal, or you got this deal or that deal, or you're doing this or that, right? Those are then rewarded with positive reinforcement of like, oh, these are the good things, right? So I need to work harder and harder and harder, and sacrifice, maybe a week-long holiday I would have taken, or sacrifice a weekend off, because I'm not going to be rewarded for that. And we almost see it as something that takes away from what we could be rewarded for, right? So it's almost like dead space when it's not. Taking time off, and again, I'm speaking to myself. Like, I posted something a couple of years ago that I constantly think about, and I remember it because I was in Portugal, and it was just a great time. It was a great couple of weeks with my wife, and it was awesome. And I really wish I could have, thinking back on it, I wish I could have been there more mentally, but nonetheless, I was still there, and I got some good experience from it. But I posted this when I was in Portugal, and I thought about it when I was sitting on the beach reading a book and taking time off, and I was like, what would happen if we took our own advice? What would happen? Like, what would your life look like if you took your own advice on a daily basis?
Yeah.
Like, cut the shit, cut the nonsense, stop feeding yourself excuses. Like, what would happen objectively if you took your own advice that you're giving everyone else? Like, what would happen if you were more self-compassionate? You gave yourself more slack, like you do everyone else, right? Like, what would life be like for you? It'd probably be a little better. I'm not saying it'd be an incredible difference. I think for some people it would, but it definitely would be better, I think. And it would be probably more enjoyable. It'd be a little bit more relaxed, but driven. And again, these are all hard things to balance. So, this isn't a one size fits all thing, but I think this is something that we all should consider more on. And I think we should surround ourselves with people who reward the things that we know to be better for you, right? So if you and I are in a conversation or texting or whatever we're doing, and it's like, and I feel as if, you ask me what I'm doing, I don't feel obligated to say, man, I just grinded a 14-hour day, like fucking crushed it. And, all this stuff happened. I got this deal and that deal. And, this did this. And I don't feel obligated to tell you that. I feel, hey, what are you doing? I took a nap. I read a book. I got some emails done. What about you, man? And it's like, that's not met with like, oh man, I've been grinding. Like, oh, I've been doing this. It's like, yeah, cool, man. Like, awesome. I'm glad you got some time off. Like, I could take some time off myself, and it's not that, again, like I need to be rewarded for saying that, or I'm trying to like virtue signal of, oh, look at me. I'm so relaxed and chill and have it all together. It's just the things that are good for us, that are good for our mental health, I think should be a little bit higher up on the hierarchy of importance, and they should be a little higher up on our reward system, that we're kind of manifesting or putting out into the world, or how we're reacting to things, right? Um, you know, and then that kind of feeds into behavior. So depending on who you're surrounding yourself with, right? So if you bust your balls for a month, you make a little extra money, depending on who you're hanging around, you could decide with that extra money to get a new car, or you could decide to take a chill week, take a holiday, take time off, and sort of reap the rewards, not of status and vanity gain, but reap the rewards of your hard work and take some time for yourself. Take some time to spend time with your friends, play some cards, read a book, go on a trip, do something that's for you, that isn't for someone else, right? I'm not saying getting a car that is for you is a bad thing. I'm just saying we typically don't make those purchases for our sole gain, right? Like, it's a status, it's a virtue signal, it's a status symbol of some kind. And not in all cases. Like, if you need a new car, dude, get a new car. But it's typically not why, And I think that's where we could start the conversation. So, who are you spending your time around, and what do they reward? Like, what do they think is cool? And I'd spend more time around people that you want qualities of yourself to be reflected in them, right? So if you're hanging around a bunch of people who are very materialistic and you don't want to be as materialistic anymore, maybe change your environment, change your social circle a bit. Find more people that care less about those things and care more about the things you care about. Spending time with each other, taking weekends off, going on trips, going on hikes, go on a camping trip, whatever that looks like to you. But it's going to be reflected in who you spend time around. So, and we're very influenced, all of us, no matter how much control you feel like you have. Like, we're all very influenced by those who are around us on a daily basis. So, even this is your social following, right? So what's being reinforced? So when you hop on social, what's being reinforced? Is it a lot of virtue signaling? Is it a lot of clout gain, or is it a lot of materialism stuff? Like, is it a lot of So there was a lot to my early career where I followed anyone and everyone who was grinding, like getting after it, like motivating the hell out of me to because that was who I rewarded that. Like, that's what I thought was the most important thing to me, at the time. And now I've almost swept my entire following and replaced them with people who just care less about those things. It's not, I'm not, the following isn't perfect on that regard, but it's definitely changed because, who we follow is people that we spend time with on a daily basis, right? It's people that are in our direct and our immediate environment. So it's important that you also audit those people, because they can be triggering more than you know.
Man, that was a gem of a response. Super valuable episode, man. I know a lot of people are going to take tons of value away from this, and I want to thank you for coming on. Yeah, I would love to do it again in the near future. Do you have any take-home things you'd let the audience in on, or any projects you have in the work?
Yeah, thank you. There are definitely some things in the works, but in the immediate sense of where you could find me or find more of my stuff is I hang out on Instagram, just my name at Austin Current. If you type in Austin, you can typically find the guy with the beard. That's me. And just physiquedevelopment.com. It's our coaching business, and we do a lot through there. And I have a podcast that I feel as if I am best articulated through. I feel like you're getting it's a platform that are it's a medium where I feel like the most of me is able to be shared and connected with. So that's called Life Beyond Fitness, and it's a podcast where I have a lot of nuanced conversation, as you can probably kind of extrapolate from how I spoke on today's podcast. Like, it's a lot on the nuance, it's a lot on context, and it's a lot on real world's conversation. And a lot of it too is to get other fitness professionals, people in this landscape that we always hear talk about research or talk about reps and sets or whatever else, training volume, or arguing this or that, or debating on topics. It's really where I get them out of that. And I just have a conversation like we were at a coffee shop talking, about life or shooting the shit or whatever. And so I've really enjoyed it. It's added a ton of value to my life. And I've thankfully gotten some great feedback from others that have said it's sort of been a fresh breath of fresh air amongst the other, podcasts they listen to on a daily basis. And I didn't want to be another fitness podcast because physique development, we have one, or it's launching soon, physique development podcast. So that's where a lot of that will go, where I'll put a lot of my fitness efforts. But for me, it's important that I have weekly or monthly conversations that are beyond fitness, right? And that's where you get the title Life Beyond Fitness. So
Good
that's
name.
really where you can find me.
All right, guys, go give him a follow on Instagram. If you're listening to this now, you already listened to the episode with Alex Bush, so go give them both a follow. Follow Physique Development, and go listen to episode of Life Beyond Fitness, and stay on the lookout for some of the things that Austin has in the works. I want to thank you again for coming on, man. Genuinely appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much.